What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're looking at Proverbs 7 and 8, and then we're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians 14 in the New Testament. So, Proverbs 7 continues the idea of a father telling a son the type of people he should look out for and say, I want to stay away from those people. Proverbs 7 is basically the instructions for this young man to stay away from any type of sexual sin, especially the type of the adultery that is being described here, where this married lady is coming out and proposing this guy to start a romantic relationship with her. As you read, this is a parable. This is a father saying, hey, I saw a young man, and this is what basically happens to young men who are taken away in this type of sin. This really happens to any type of people who follow their sin. And you're going to describe all the things that this guy is tempted with. And this lady, it's one particular lady, catches him in a place he shouldn't be, saying things that she shouldn't say, and proposing things that he should not do, and then it just goes on further and further. And the climax of all this is where the author of Proverbs says, with much seductive speech she persuades him, with her smooth talk she compels him, and all at once he follows her. He'll just follow this sexual sin. And as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast till an arrow pierces its liver, as a bird rushes into a snare, he does not know that it will cost him his life. He doesn't know that this sin will be the end of him. It will ruin him because he's not thinking straight about this. So the father tells the son, don't be like this guy. Look at verse 24. It says, and now, O sons, listen to me. Be attentive to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray to her paths. For many a victim she has laid low, and her slain, people that she's killed, are a mighty throng. So many people have been taken out by this sin. Her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death. It's a strong warning against any of this type of sin, saying don't even take any steps towards it because it is so dangerous. Proverbs 8 goes on to say, hey, if you're going to pursue wisdom, here's the type of person you should be. Don't be a simple one. Don't be a foolish person. Be a person who's listening to wisdom call out. It's interesting that in Proverbs 7, the lady in Proverbs 7 is this evil temptress lady. The lady in Proverbs 8 is someone calling out, speaking the truth, speaking wisdom. Basically saying when the lady, so to speak, of Proverbs 7 calls out, don't listen. But when the lady of Proverbs 8 calls out, listen to her, because she's telling the truth. She's speaking this wisdom. She's speaking this truth. She says, the fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. That's verse 13. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. I have counseled and have sound wisdom. I have insight and strength. By me, kings reign and rulers decree what is just. Basically, this is wisdom just going off saying, hey, wise people listen to me. Wise people understand the truth. It says earlier in the chapter, it says, O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. It's a call for people to stop being foolish, stop being simple, which is a little different than foolish, right? Foolish is somebody who knows the truth and rejects it and says, I don't want to live for it. Simple seems to be that they just don't know the truth, but they don't exactly want to hear the truth either. So it's not a good position to be in. You don't want to be a simple person, but a foolish person is certainly someone you don't want to be. He goes on and talks about how this lady wisdom just cries out and says all of these things. In fact, she actually describes herself in this chapter, wisdom speaking. That's why the she that I'm talking about. And as you read, you'll see it. She says that I was there at the beginning of the world. God actually created the world and fashioned things together utilizing wisdom, which is an interesting idea to think that when we do wise things and we learn wisdom, we're actually learning and partaking in something that was true of God when he created the world. That's just interesting. Think about that. God created the world with wisdom. Okay? He, out of his wisdom and his mind, created things to be the way that they are. Now, he is imparting wisdom to us. Now you can live a different kind of life with the wisdom that God provides. Think about that. That is pretty amazing to think that you have access to the wisdom of God through this book, through what we're reading here in Proverbs specifically. So super awesome. And as you read, just say, I want to be a person who listens to the right influences, not these other people. You should ask yourself the question, what voices am I listening to? Are you being persuaded by the Proverbs 7 woman, or are you being transformed by the Proverbs 8 woman? Are you being the person who's following the ways of the world, or are you being transformed by the renewal of your mind, as it says in Romans 12? So those are important questions for us to ask as we consider wisdom and foolishness and temptation. That's the big thing Proverbs 7 is all about. So let's continue in 1 Corinthians 14. We looked at the beginning yesterday. We're looking at the end of this chapter today, talking about tongues and prophecy. So if you want to learn more about that, go back and watch yesterday's if you didn't already. But the idea here is now Paul shifting from, hey, use your gifts to serve the church, which he's still thinking about that. Now he's saying this is how a church service should be. It's going to be instructions for how the church service should be. And the thing that for us to keep in mind is that obviously the church service looked a little bit different. People would stand up and speak. That's similar as today. But there's instructions on who should and who shouldn't. Specifically, it's saying, hey, if somebody is going to speak the truth, let's pay attention to them. Let's not have all these people speaking all at once in a way that's confusing. The bottom line, he gets to it at the end, says, God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. That's verse 33. So basically it says in verse 26, what then, brothers? When you come together, each one has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Let all things be done for building up. If anyone has a tongue, and let there be only 2 or 3 at most, each in his turn. Let someone interpret. The bottom line is, with this early church worship service, they weren't supposed to be out of control. I think it's ironic that today, the people who promote a version of tongues, which is an unbiblical version of tongues, they are the people who have the most out of control worship services. Because when you're supposed to speak in tongues, it literally says, don't have more than 2. Right, which basically means, hey, don't be all confused. Don't let this person be speaking over here and that person over there, right? We're as a church, we're listening to one thing at a time. Let's not have a bunch of things going on at the same time. That's why when we read the Bible together, right, in church, you open the Bible, we read it together. When we're hearing a sermon, we're not listening to 3 sermons at the same time. Right? We're not singing 6 different worship songs all at the same time. That would be confusing. In fact, in most churches you go to, you're doing only one thing at a time, which is helpful. Sometimes you're doing 2 things when maybe the bag is being passed and you're giving an offering, and you're also worshiping, and you're worshiping through giving, and you're also worshiping through song. But there's really only 1 or 2 things we do at one time, because we want to be focused on what God has us there doing. We're there to learn. We're there to grow. We're there to learn God's word. We're there to encourage one another. That's what we go to church for. We don't go to church just to show off and to tell everybody how great we are, which is what a lot of these people were doing. You could imagine that if certain people were standing up saying, I have a revelation from God, I have this from God, I have this, that all the attention, it was a game of attention. Who get the most attention? And Paul says, don't do that. Let's just do these things in order. Another thing that we see here that you might notice as you read today is there's a command for women not to be someone who speaks up in church. And I want you to remember what we've been talking about. You could imagine these people who are speaking up in church saying, I want to speak on this and I want to talk on this. Paul says, let's make sure it's not confusing. What we see here is Paul, just like he says in 1 Timothy 2, he doesn't want women to take the authoritative roles in these churches, which is still true today. That's why a lot of churches, most churches that are biblical, all churches I say that are biblical, don't say that their leadership, their pastors or their elders are women, because Paul's pretty clear that's not okay. That's not how he wants the church to be set up. Ultimately, that's because God set it up that way, and we see more of that in 1 Timothy 2 if you want to see more about that. So, anyway, as you read today, I like what he says at the end as he sums it all up. Let all things be done decently and in order. That is instructions on how church worship services should take place. So as you think about your church, just notice that you're kind of going to start to see why things happen the way they are. If you've never understood it before, passages like 1 Corinthians 14 will tell you. If you say, well, why can't we have 6 worship songs going on at once? Well, that's probably not a question you'd ask, but this is why, because we want to do all things decently and in order. We don't want our services to be out of control and out of order. So anyway, that's what we're reading today. Hopefully that is helpful for you. Make sure you dig into the word today and take so much from it, because there's so much here for you. Thanks for reading. See you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.